Namaste, Shalom, Salam. This is Gaia Mother Sophia. How are you all? Today I want to talk about speaking with those that have passed. I had to make the title of the video Speaking with Dead People because I think that's how people will come to the video. But I don't believe in dead people. It's the body that passes and the soul continues. I give you a little bit about my background. I was brought up a Muslim. We didn't believe in reincarnation. We didn't believe in speaking with dead. And the same goes for when I was a Catholic, when I became a Catholic in 2010. And I became a Catholic because I saw the Virgin Mary twice. She appeared in front of me twice. And then I studied for a year and I became a Catholic. And now I am, if anybody wants to know my religious beliefs, I don't have any beliefs. I know. My knowing is completely open. The wisdom of the universe runs through me as the divine Sophia. And in every single religion out there, there are clues as to our unity, as to our brother and sisterhood. Actually, we are all the same. And I've got some very sacred past lives from Mexico and Chichen Itza, Egypt and India, where I remember my sacred past lives, divine past lives, Bodh Gaya, when I was Kuan Yin. And as my past lives woke up, I understood that I'd been here many lifetimes, and I was like the head, I don't like the word head, an enlightened being in all of the different religions. So I understood that it all is one whole. So let's step to how I ended up speaking with those that have passed. Now, I had a major spiritual awakening in 2014. I went through a divorce, and after that, I basically I was drinking, I was going out a lot, as most people do, to forget the sadness, really. So for a while it was fun, and then it wasn't working, it's not really working. So my body was tired of me abusing it, because that's what we do when you drink, smoke, or take drugs. You're hurting yourself because you're actually hurting, and so you hurt yourself. Even though on a conscious level you don't think you're hurting yourself and you think you're having a good time, you are actually hurting yourself because you want to feel pain. And you get used to that pain, so you keep repeating that pain. And so I then went to a fasting clinic. I'd never fasted before, only as a Muslim, where in the morning you wake up and eat, and in the evening, sunrise to sunset, you didn't eat. This was different in that I didn't eat at all for 3 weeks. And after the first week, I started to get messages for people, which it was like telepathic. I didn't hear voices, it was telepathic, and it was like, tell this woman this, or tell this man that. So I was giving, and I had to do it. It was like, when you need to go for a pee, it's that urgency. You have to go for a pee. I have to tell that person this message. And every time I was right. And every time they either cried and held me or asked me how I knew that. So that's where it started. And then somebody committed suicide the same year where I live. It was a young boy. I didn't know him. I didn't know his family. Never met them. And 3 days after his death, I kept getting a message, knock on their door, knock on their door. And I was thinking, you're a fool, Sophia. You don't know these people. They've just lost their only child. They're going to think you're nuts. But it was so strong, I knocked on their door. And the lady answered, the mother. And I said to her, I have no idea what I'm doing. I need to tell you, I don't know what I'm doing, but I need to go into your son's room and the place from where he jumped. She let me in, and immediately when I went to where he jumped, I said, it's not your fault. Then I went into his bedroom, and I had a telepathic communication, and I started to speak. I said, it's not your fault. He loves you so much. It's because of his university, something to do with university. He loves you. There's a lot of happiness here. And then I said, Sammy tells me to tell you you're a silly mummy. And then she started to laugh, and she said, Sammy always says that to me, Mummy, you're silly. Anyway, he communicated a few more times, and the family, actually, mother and father actually said to me that they would have killed themselves if it wasn't for me, because they didn't believe in any of this either. But because the information I had was so correct, and their soul became open, you know, to the point where they asked me to sit in the funeral car and to stand with them in the church, you know, which was it was a big thing because I didn't know them, you know. Sorry, I'm getting emotional recalling that story. We're still friends, and they're family now to me. Now, the other thing that happened a year later, this is when it got stronger. A year later, I participated in an ayahuasca ceremony where my past lives all woke up. So there was this progression. And my father died just before I went into the 3-day meditation. And in the meditation, he basically jumped inside my body and started to talk. And he literally, my eyes were closed, and he said, "My name is Hayat Khan. Sofia Hayat is my daughter. Born on the 6th of December 1974. She is my daughter. I have done bad things and she can clear them." And I was just in this space of no body. My body wasn't there. It's the consciousness, the place of consciousness, or the soul or spirit. So I didn't really see him. There was nothing. It was darkness. But our souls were there, our energy, our consciousness, spirit. And at one point I saw his face, and I said, "Daddy, where are you?" And at that point he showed his face, and he went up and became a star, and he said, "I am always in your heart." And he said that through me, so I was speaking. 4 days later, when I went to the funeral, after we buried my father, this is so emotional to recall. After we buried my father, I went back to my brother's house with other members of my family, and we were sat down, and all of a sudden my whole body started to tingle, and I'm like, something is happening. So I grabbed my niece and I said, "Hannah, come with me into the hallway, because something's going to happen and I don't know what's going to happen." She came with me into the hallway, and then all of a sudden my dad started to speak through me, only it wasn't like conversation, he was crying. So it looked like I was crying, and I went onto the floor because my legs went like jelly. And then my family came out, and their mouths were like, you know, they were all shocked because none of them believe in this, nor did I. And he started saying, he was crying, but it was me crying because he was using my body to speak through. And he was crying and saying, "I love your mother so much. I love her so much. I love her so much. I was so bad to her." And he was crying, and I was crying, and I was on the floor, and it was super intense for me. And he basically was telling us stuff, how he loved her, how he was bad to her, how he hurt her. It was just so intense, and like literally, not me, my dad was crying through me so much that the neighbors came over thinking that a woman was being beat up. And then my brother just said my sister's upset because my dad died. They were all mouth wide open, and at one point I started to shake so much because it happened at the retreat, but it was short and sweet and over. And I guess on an energetic level, I had the support of lots of angels. And here, because all my members of the family were there, it was more intense because my dad wanted to speak to all of them. And I, at one point, started to shake. And I said, "Dad, get out of my body. I can't handle this." And he kept talking and he wouldn't come out. Then my niece said, "Granddad, get out." And he did. But I felt this sickness. Like I felt him in the whole house, and I said, "Nobody speak. No one ask him another question because he will jump back in my body and I can't handle it." And my cousin then said, "Sophia, can I ask one thing?" I said, "No, please don't." And then he did ask one thing. "I just want to know if I did anything wrong." And my dad understood then that it was a bit intense for me, and I then just got a telepathic message, and I said, he says he was just joking, and my cousin understood. That was the first time that it was like so intense, I didn't know how to control it. My elder sister wasn't present then. And then a few times after the funeral, when I was, sorry about the traffic, I should have closed the window, but London's experiencing a heat wave. She called me because she was like, okay, what happened? Anyway, we were just talking generally, and then on my mobile phone, I'm talking to her, and then I get a bleep that somebody else is trying to call me. So I said, oh, someone's trying to call me. And I looked at the phone, and it was her trying to call me from the same number. And I said, this is so strange. You're trying to call me from your same phone, which is impossible. And she said, no, I'm not. I said, well, it's showing on my phone. I said, let's just leave it. It's probably some sort of mistake. We're talking again. 15 minutes later, the same thing happens. I'm like, you're calling me again. And then I knew, like my knowing kicked in. This is because my psychic ability was, you know, getting stronger and stronger. And I said, it's Dad, he wants to talk to you. I said, let's do this then. And so by then, I'd actually called somebody and I'd asked them, I said, look, this is happening to me. I don't know how to control it. And I'd like to know how to control it. And they basically said that if I want it to happen, all I have to say is give them permission to use my body as a channel, and if I, or not give them permission. So I developed, it's just my telepathy, my knowing, my past lives, all had the wisdom on how to do this. So I sat down on the floor, and I, just because I need to be, I sit down on the floor and I give up my body, so to speak. So I completely relax my body. I get rid of any thought in my mind. Like, I don't think of anything, because if you think of something, then that cannot happen. And so I completely let go of thought. And I said to my dad, I give you permission to use my body as a channel. I said it 3 times. And then he started speaking to my sister through me. And they had a full-on conversation. She asked him some questions about where the will was, and he told her with full description. And the filing cabinet and the files did exist. And he spoke to her a few times until he had nothing more to say. And it would always happen when we were on the phone. And basically after that, I had a number of occasions where if somebody came to me for a healing and I felt somebody's presence, I would say, look, somebody wants to speak to you. And it wasn't always told to me who they were. That's not how it works with me. But I'd say it was your father in those cases. But one thing that I understood is that that person is not allowed to speak through me unless that person gives the permission first. So I can't just give the permission if that person wants to speak to somebody else. That other person has to give the permission. And I had a very interesting case once where this woman didn't actually come for a healing. She was a friend of mine, and I'd become a nun at this point because my past life as Saint Sophia woke up, and as the Mother Mary, and I honoured that, and my body physically didn't want to have sex, and so I became a spiritual nun. I didn't belong to any church or any organisation. I did it myself. I wore a white habit because my body didn't want to have sex, and I didn't want to be a sexual being, and I wanted to disassociate with everything that I had built in my life. So I didn't want to be an actress, I didn't want to be attractive, I didn't want people to look at me and judge me or like me or anything. I just wanted to be a symbol of what I was and am, as a non-sexual being that was in service. Yes, I've evolved from that now, but that's another story. So she came to me at that point, and when she came, she said she'd had a dream about me, and she came to see me. She knocked on the door, and I opened the door, and she started looking at me like this, and she said, "Sophia, I can see an angel behind you." And I said, "Yeah, there's lots of angels here." And she said, "No, it's like massive with wings." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "There's lots of angels looking after me." Archangel Michael was working with me a lot, and Gabriel at the time. But Gabriel, unfortunately, has been a little bit deceptive. And I know some people say, how can angels be deceptive? In the first few pages of the Quran, you will read about how one of the angels didn't listen to Allah. Anyway, so she came up, and I showed her my little temple. And that's when something came in, and I said, "Your dad's here." And it was so intense. She didn't want to speak to him, and I said, "Listen, I would advise you to. You don't have to, because I need your permission." She finally gave the permission, and he couldn't speak. It was like he was talking through me, saying, I'm her father." And when he said the word father, I felt sickness in my throat chakra. I was really bad. I was bad to her. I love her so much. I was so wrong. I was so wrong. She was only 5. She was only 5. She starts crying. "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." And she said, "Yes, you ruined my life." And there was this conversation going on. I won't go into the full details of what had happened, but there was sexual abuse involved, and it was very emotional. And then he said, "Let me be a father to you now. I couldn't be a father in the physical world, but I'd like to be a father to you in the spiritual one." She said, "What do you mean?" And he said, anyone that comes near you within 10 meters with ill intention, I will take away the ill intention." And she said, "Yes, do it." He said, thank you, you've given me the chance to be a father." And then he went, and I just looked at her. I said, "Do you know what he's done?" And she said, "No." And I said, "I know what happens when you die. When you die, everything that you've ever done to anybody else that is harmful, you will feel that pain and that suffering that they went through when you die. So you know what you did, you caused. There's no hell and fire. Your suffering is to know what you did to hurt others, and you will feel that pain, because the soul is pure." So he basically has decided to take on all of that from anybody with any ill intention within 10 meters of her, to protect her. And it's a huge thing, because that means he could be suffering for lifetimes, many, many lifetimes. And he knew what that meant, that suffering, because he was already in suffering from what he had done. I'm getting emotional again, because it's such a massive thing for a soul to do. Such a massive thing for a soul to do. And she just looked at me and understood that. That's why I do this work, It changes people's lives. And it changes the souls of those who are no longer here, so that they can pass and go on. Anyway, 2 weeks later, she sent me a message saying, I think she's in her 50s, 60s now. 2 weeks later, she's in her 40s actually. 2 weeks later, she sent me a message saying, "For the first time in my life, I forgive my father. I love him, and I feel his protection." And that's a woman who, from the age of life, feared and hated a father who abused her. Huge, huge. And people wonder why I gave up acting to do this work, Because this is real. This is real. Acting is just pretend, and it's ego. It is ego. I love seeing beautiful things as an actor. I love seeing myself perform. I love seeing other people perform. It gives me delight. It does. But there's a part of it that's ego. Huge part of it that's ego. Because you want and you desire. You also want to make people happy. Because you want to receive that happiness and joy back. So So that's how, that's my journey. And people do come to me, whether it's on the phone or whether it's in person. I do recommend in-person channeling purely because it can be really emotional. And putting the phone down afterwards can be a bit lonely because nobody else around you has understood that or had that conversation with the soul with the body that has passed. So I recommend it in person so that you can then integrate the experience with me or whoever else. And I just want to finish off by telling you that those that have passed are always communicating with you. There are symbols, there are signs all the time, up until they know that you're okay. So this is another thing that's really important when people have passed. When they pass, I had another client who, when her father passed, and he'd been dead 3 years, her life just went, her business, her life, everything went downhill. And when she came to see me, basically what had happened, and I understood, I looked at her, she just started crying and put her head on the floor, and I didn't know why she was there. It was a group of 4 people actually. And I just said, "Is her father dead?" And they said yes. I said, "At the funeral, she didn't want him to go, did she?" And her brother was there. He said, "No." I didn't know he was a brother at the time because it was 4 people that turned up. 2 had told me they were coming, and the other 2 just turned up with them. Anyway, what had happened is her father was in her body for those 3 years. And when I was talking to him, and I basically said, "What are you doing? And why are you in her body?" He said, "Well, I did something bad." And he was crying, "I did something bad." I said, "What did you do?" "I left my child. She didn't want me to go." And so he stayed in her body. And so it's something, I'm hoping that this can give you some information that when people pass, please celebrate their life, because there's not enough education out there about what happens when you die. So sometimes the soul is confused because the soul is like, okay, I've passed, all these people are crying, they're upset, and they don't want me to go. So they don't go and they hang around until they know that you're okay with them to go. It's so important that we celebrate their lives. And we make them understand that it's okay for them to pass. Because you have to understand, when the body goes, the soul is so much sensitive. Because the soul is pure. And when the soul sees your tears and listens to your words, some hang around because they're looking after people as angels. And it's absolutely fine to have that guardian angel, your family or ancestors. Some of the ancestors who have already passed will be there as your guardian angels. So angels are not just your Angel Gabriels or your Archangel Michaels. They will be ancestors of yours. To the point where you rise, and that rising of your soul can happen here on this planet. Like my soul is enlightened. My past lives have woken up. I still have angels guiding me. I have a lot of angels. This whole building once was so packed full of angels that it was like the London Underground, but full of angels. It was so beautiful. I was in awe at the service that they give to us. Once again, I'm getting emotional. Because whether you know it or not, whether you feel it or not, or whether you believe it or not, there's guardian angels and ancestors and entities around you all the time, guiding you, preventing accidents, trying to come through. You'll know when they come through, because you will always get this feeling in here when you're supposed to do something or not supposed to do something. Sometimes we ignore that. Your gut feeling, your first instinct, the first thought that comes in is the answer. So if you're going to tune yourself to that, then you're in tune with your guardian angels. So when you listen to your gut, you're listening to your angels. You're listening to your higher purpose and your higher self. I hope that that's given you some information, enlightenment, guidance, peace. And I send you much blessings and love on this incredible day. Let there be an understanding of unity, of togetherness, of oneness, of being, and of love. Namaste, shalom, salam.